Greetings everyone, welcome to another episode of BirdSong. I'm your host as always, Caiyuda Kiora, and in this episode we have John Lockley joining us. John Keith Kelly Lockley is a fully initiated shaman or sangoma in the Xhosa lineage of South Africa, the same tribe that gave us Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. Traditional healers or shamans, sangomas, of the Xhosa people of South Africa use sacred ceremonies involving herbs, songs, and trance rhythms to connect with the ancestors and the natural world to encourage a profound remembering and honouring of the human spirit. John is unique in being initiated in three timeless traditions: African shamanism as a Xhosa Sangoma, yoga and Zen Buddhism, and he also holds a degree in clinical psychology. He's the author of the book Leopard Warrior and the audiobook The Way of the Leopard, which you can find over at Amazon or through his publisher, Sounds True, or you can head directly to his website to find out more about him and his work, which is johnlockley.com. All of those links will be in the description section of this episode, and you can head over to medicinepath.net/birdsong for all of the links and resources. And what a pleasure it was to sit down with John and to have this conversation. And I love the medicine that he brings when it comes to connecting to our humanity, to soul, to spirit, to the wilderness internally and also externally. And I feel that many of you will find resonance in his message and his prayer. So let's get straight into this episode of BirdSong. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And I trust you will find value in this dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. I'll mention to you that ever since I started this podcast, I've been touching on the same theme to open up the conversation. And that theme is honoring the sacred or remembering the sacred. And I typically put forth an invitation to my guests to either share a prayer or a poem or a song or an invocation of some sorts to open up our time together. Or alternatively, the invitation is there to share your reflections on what the sacred means to you and how you honor this in your daily life. So I would love to pass it over to you, John, and just say thanks once again for gifting your time for myself and our community of listeners and viewers. And I would love you to take it from there.
Okay, well, I could start off with just a simple chant, because Sangoma means people of the song, because we connect to the spirit world through chanting and through singing. So just give me a moment. Uvu sabalele, mama, uvu sabalele. 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 Vu sabalele. Vu sabalele, mama, uvu sabalele. Siyanqola siyathandaza Gqamagu, abantu abadala uvunilela, abantu abadala siyanqola siyathandaza, siyanqola manyange sithi Gqamagu, ndingucingo lendaba, mthomi mhlobo kinkyamba, ijok, induyengwe, kokumoya, John Keith Kelly Lockley, dalapa apa, i-podcast. Caiyuda siyanqola siyathandaza uvunilela manyange Gqamagu. Yeah, so those words of Vusabalela means it's saying we are waking up, mother, we are waking up. We have stopped sleeping, mother, we have stopped sleeping. We are waking up, mother, we are waking up.
Beautiful. Yes. And hopefully hopefully there are more of us waking up. Hopefully there are not as many people sleeping. And I think we're seeing that today with the global events and all that's happening.
Yes. It's a crazy time right now. It's a crazy time.
Well, John, let's continue on the thread for the sacred for a moment. I would love to ask you how your relationship to the sacred has blossomed over time. And I mentioned to you that I know some of your history after listening to quite a few podcast conversations you've been on and other talks and some of your written work as well. So, over your journey of childhood and your work in the field of psychology, and then being in the army and the Zen Buddhism, and then your decade-long apprenticeship with the well-known, well-renowned Sangoma medicine woman, Mam Guibu. Yeah, so you yourself were initiated into and I've been trying to practice how to say this, and I'll give it a go. Xhosa?
Xhosa.
Yeah, with the clicks. It's very, very difficult to get that click in. But how has your relationship to the sacred ebbed and flowed over this time? Like, what are some of the key points of reflection for you here?
Well, in terms of the sacred, my experience with the sacred is it's always changing. And my experience with the sacred is through dreams, because as sangomas we dream. And we connect with our dreams, and we listen to our dreams. So we dream trackers, and kind of similar to the Aboriginal peoples around the world, like in Australia. We work with dreams in a very big way, and then we do plant medicine, we do cleanses, and we do ceremonies to bring out the sacred or bring out the spirit in the dream. So the dreams are always calling us. They're always calling us to wake up. They're always calling us to go on pilgrimage. They're calling us to go deeper with our humanity. And as a Sangoma, the job is to keep listening to the dreams.
How do you tend to articulate what it is that the sacred is?
Well, you feel it. How do you feel the sacred?
With my heart.
There you go. So There's nothing special about it. It's just something that you feel. It's like music.
Yeah.
It's all about listening to the rhythm. And when the rhythm is very sweet, then you're connecting to something sublime. So when people ask me about dreams, I always say, well, feel your dream like you listen to a song. Or feel your dream like you're watching a painting. Don't just cut the dream up and analyze it and ask if it's a good or bad dream, because we don't do that with paintings. We don't do that with music. The music has got all different colors and tones in it. Same thing with a good painting. And that's the way we should look at our dreams.
Yeah, I love the way that you have answered that, just so short and concise and simple. And there can certainly be that tendency to, as you say, overanalyze things and perhaps over-articulate and get super logical and rational about what the sacred means. But it really is so simple. It just comes back to feeling. I love that.
Yeah. That's with music. With music, you listen to the rhythm, you're feeling it, and then you go into the sweetness of that rhythm, which means you have to keep listening and feeling. And if you're playing music with other people, you have to keep listening to their rhythm and what they're bringing in. So that's what's beautiful about music.
I agree. Well, as I mentioned before, you've just been on so many podcasts, and I encourage community who are tuning into this podcast to go over to your website or find out those various channels and to listen to more about your story. And you talk more about how you came to this path and the initiatory sickness that is classic within the context of worldwide shamanistic traditions. And you talk about Ubuntu, which is this idea, or rather an embodied notion or knowing of shared humanity. And there's the dancing and the singing and the chanting and the connecting with the ancestors, the dreaming, all of these related themes. But we touched on it a bit when we were just talking before we hit record. And I'll ask you this more formally. So what is it that you're most excited to talk about and share with the larger web of community these days?
About the wilderness and how as we as human beings can help save the wilderness. Because It's all very well to focus on your own spiritual practice and your own enlightenment. But what good is your own enlightenment when the birds are dying? So I'm not really interested in whether someone has enlightenment or not. What I want to know is, what do they do with it? What do they do with their spiritual practice? Because sadly nowadays in the West and in the modern world, spirituality has become so heavily commercialized that people, when they're doing a workshop or they're doing a retreat, they're always thinking, what can they get from this? What are the benefits? Because that's the way it's being sold. These are the benefits. This is what you're going to get. This is your take home from this experience. And it's unfortunate, because spirituality really is about, what can you give? What can you give to the world? How can you open your heart and be in service? And it's interesting, because when I did my 10-year apprenticeship, really that's what it was about. It was about service. I mean, I wouldn't have gone through the first week if I had the attitude with my teacher and the elders of, what can they give me? I wouldn't have survived, because it's not polite, it's rude, and they really want to feel your heart. They want to feel your commitment. So apprenticeship is really about service. So my first service was serving my community and my teacher, and it would involve helping clean the floors and buy groceries and just helping, just absolutely helping in any way. And then during that time, you'd sit down and have meetings with the elders, and then you'd share your dreams, and then they would help me. So with the wilderness, the question is, how can we as human beings center inside ourselves and feel the wilderness inside ourselves? And then how can we help the wilderness outside? So this is the project behind all my work. But the first thing is helping people connect to their spirit. Because as we say in South Africa, in traditional sangoma circles, the first thing on the road to becoming a human being is to connect to your spirit, to connect to your soul. And one of the ways we do that is through listening to our dreams. And then if someone doesn't remember their dreams and they can't experience that soul in their dreams, we say they need to go and speak to a sangoma. Because if they're not remembering their dreams, they're not working with their dreams, then they are not connected to their humanity, which means they can be in danger to their community. Now, nowadays, human beings are in danger to themselves and also the wider community of the world, which is the animal and plant world. And the main reason is because they are not connected to their humanity. They are not connected to their soul. So what does it mean to be connected to your soul, to the sacred inside of you? It means to listen and feel your heartbeat, to feel the breath inside of you, to feel your connection to the dream time. And one of the ways we do that is by tracking our dreams at night and listening to our dreams. And those dreams at night connect us to our immortality, to our particular connection to the great dreamer. Now, yoga speaks about this through connection to Atman. Atman is connection to the soul, and that's connection to the soul of life. And Buddhism, they talk about it in terms of connecting to the shining, Kanya. Kanya would be the Xhosa or Zulu word. And there's an old word where they say the Buddha is not clever, the Buddha is shining. So how can we connect to that shining part of us, that Buddha nature, which is everywhere? So the first part of the work for me is helping people connect to their inner wilderness. And then once they connect to their inner wilderness, the next thing is, how can we be in service to this world?
Yeah, and those are such powerful reflection points. And you've touched on dreaming there, and you have explored this in great detail in other podcasts, and that's certainly another rabbit hole there. But something that you mentioned prior to jumping on our recording is the retreats that you've been facilitating. I'm wondering if you want to talk about these retreats that you've been facilitating and how this ties into helping us come to a deeper level of appreciation of the wilderness within, and then of course connecting directly, having that direct revelation through the wilderness without.
Well, I mentioned this in my book, Leopard Warrior. So for the listeners, if they want to go in deeper, just get yourself a copy of Leopard Warrior. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere really. Just put it into your Google and you'll find it. Otherwise, at the end of this show, we'll give a link. But in my writing, I talk about, first, the person has to have an intention that they want to connect to their soul. They want to connect to their inner wilderness. So that's the first thing. And then that first intention then guides them to finding stillness inside. That's the next thing. And we do that through listening to the heartbeat. So I'd always encourage people to feel your heartbeat. So closing your eyes and feeling the pulse inside of you, that pulse of. Because if you want to save the world, we first have to feel our connection to the world. And the connection each of us has right in this moment is that connection to our own heartbeat, our own pulse. So as we really explore and feel our own pulse, we're feeling our own connection to the life force going through us. So that's the first meditation for people, is to feel that. And then feel that presence around them. Feel that electrical energy around them, that presence. Call it the presence of nature. Call it the presence of the Great Mother. Feel that electrical energy around you. And then the next thing is to start a devotional practice of giving thanks for being alive. Because spirituality is really about devotion. And the first devotion is giving thanks for this bone body. And the way we give thanks for the bone body is showing love and appreciation to our mother's people, our ancestors down our mother's side. And then showing love and appreciation to our father's people, the ancestors down our father's side. And then the next thing is a sense of looking upwards and giving thanks to the Creator, or the Great Spirit, or the Great Dreamer, for this earth walk. So as we do that, you're creating a triangle. So the triangle is a very ancient symbol in all cultures. So we have to set up this alchemy inside of us first. So becoming a human being is a process of accepting your birthright, accepting this gift of being human. So in the traditional Xhosa culture, we say that people are born human, but they have to accept their humanity. They have to choose their humanity. They have to choose to become human. So nowadays you have a whole lot of people, they look like human beings, but they're not acting like human beings. So we have to choose, make a choice that we want to connect with our humanity. And as we do that, the pathway is listening to your heartbeat and then giving thanks for this gift of being human, which means giving thanks to the bones, the bone body, mothers, ancestors, fathers, and then the Creator. And then that starts this alchemy going inside of us, which also we talk about the rise of the Umbelini. And Umbelini is a similar word to Kundalini. Now, Kundalini and a Kundalini awakening is very, very similar to an Umbelini awakening that we have in South Africa, except we don't talk about it in a glamorous way because it can be very painful. Because as you start to wake up as a human being, you start to become very sensitive. And nowadays, in the Western world, there's an over-glamorization of shamanism. And it's funny because in South Africa, no one wants to become a sangoma. No one wants to be a shaman. Because in traditional circles, they know about the pain of being a sangoma, the pain of feeling the suffering of the world and feeling the suffering of the community. So as we make a decision to connect with our humanity, connect with our bones, with our ancestors, we give thanks to the Great Spirit, we are given our purpose, we are given our calling. And that sets off this alchemy and sets up this Umbelini rising, this Kundalini energy going in your spine. And then you start to get very, very sensitive. Or as we say in Xhosa, people become very moody, emotional. And that is the process of becoming an empath. And an empath is someone who feels the suffering of others, not just the human world, but the plants and animal worlds as well. So everyone is called to their humanity because they're born human. Every human being is called to go deep into their bone body. Whether they accept that calling or not is up to them. And then this leads us into a whole process of choice. We have to choose our gifts. It's not just given to us. We have to ask for it. We have to choose it. And then when we receive it, we have to give thanks for it. And so this is part of that devotional practice I'm talking about.
And then flowing on from here is this piece where we are at this place where we are connected to humanity, to our humanity, to soul, to spirit, to purpose, and then we are channeling that in a way that is being in service to the greater web of life, which is ultimately helping the wilderness and helping us to find harmony, come back into harmony with the natural world.
Yeah, and then just for a daily practice, it's always good to take note of the animal world around us. Has the dog got water? Has the kitten or the cat been fed? And the plants, the indoor plants, are they being watered? Because it's not unusual to see plants in a yoga center that haven't been watered. But that's not good yoga practice. Because yoga practice is not just about your own back bend. Yoga practice is also about the state of the living creatures around you.
Yes, and that's a good point as well. There can certainly be a tendency to want to over-glamorize this nature connection or helping the wilderness by going out there and doing big and extravagant things to be of assistance. But oftentimes it's just coming back home and attending to one's own backyard first. And like you say, feeding the animals or watering the plants or growing some herbs or some vegetables in your back garden, just tending to the land in a very simple way.
And that's where it starts. And the first tending we have to do is to our own hearts, our own heartbeat. So as a healer and as people who are therapists, the first thing they have to do is see, are they overgiving? How are they looking after their own heart? How are they looking after their own energy? And that's not being narcissistic. That's just it's really feeling the presence of life force around you and in you, and then taking the calling from that space. Because if we just go from our head and you want to save the world and you become an activist, then you're missing something, because you could also be standing on other people's toes, because you could be full of anger. And you could be pushing people in the wrong way, and then that can become a problem, So the first rule of being an activist, let's say an ecological activist, would be to feel your own wilderness inside you. So what is the state of your dreams? What is the state of the oceans inside of you, and the forests inside of you, and the deserts? Can you feel the landscapes inside of you? And if an activist can't do that, then that's the first place for them to start their activism. It's to feel their humanity and the pulse of the great drum inside of them. So the great drum is everyone's heartbeat. And it's interesting because as you start to observe your own heartbeat, your rhythm improves and your actual heart pulse gets stronger.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what I'm thinking about is this other end of the spectrum when it comes to nature connection or assisting the wilderness, which ties into this sacred activism. And what I'm thinking about is this conversation that you had with Raghu Marcus on his podcast, Mind Rolling.
Yeah.
And you mentioned swimming with the great white sharks, which is obviously is on the very other end of that kind of spectrum of tending and learning from the wilderness. So I guess I would love to know what other kind of perhaps amazing nature encounters you've had during your time out there in Africa or anywhere else for that matter, and expanding on from there, if there's anything that comes to mind when it does come to nature or the natural world passing on particular teachings or lessons, just as the leopard has to you.
Well, we can talk about the great white shark.
Okay.
I wanted to experience swimming with one of the most feared creatures in the world, which is the great white shark. And a friend of mine has done a lot of nature conservation and a lot of filmmaking in South Africa. And he's actually just done a beautiful film called My Teacher the Octopus. His name's Craig Foster, and everyone can get that on Netflix. It's very beautiful, My Teacher the Octopus. Anyway, Craig was talking to me about the great white shark and his experiences of swimming with them. And he said they're the most sublime creatures, and you get a sense of stillness and silence around them. So I went and did some cage diving. So you're just in a cage at the side of the ship, and they lower you down, and then they attract the sharks. And it's a bit touristy, it is, but I was able to experience watching the great whites from quite close. They were quite close, just like a meter away or so. And then I had this kind of scary experience because the great white went past us a few times, and my place in the cage was right at the end, so there was no one on the other side of me. And we're just holding onto the bars, and the spaces between the bars are quite large, actually, you know. So the shark came past, and it had that spirit that Craig was talking about, that stillness, and very majestic, this presence of this incredible creature going past you. And so I did this a few times, going around the cage. And then this next time I came past, and I don't know what got into it, but it was a split second. It just started attacking the buoy on the left of me. I mean, the buoy, like the foam buoy, as opposed to the buoy. Foam buoy.
Sure.
Right next to it, this foam it helped the ballast of the cage, and it just attacked it for some reason. I don't know why. And the whole cage shook, the whole boat shook. And in that moment, you could just see that primal instinctive energy that was so powerful. And sadly, that was the one thing that has made human beings so scared of the shark. Their primal instinctive nature, which is so powerful and instills such fear in people. However, interesting enough, the real predators are actually human beings, because now the numbers of great whites have gone down. And so that's quite sad, very sad, in fact. But anyway, that experience with the great white was very beautiful, actually. And what the captain of the boat said to us was that they got all these senses all the way down their spine, and they're just these sensory creatures. They're just feeling and sensing everything. And in his experience, he said they're very intelligent, but a different kind of intelligence to, say, a dolphin or a whale.
Yeah, and when you're touching on this fear around the primal predatory nature of the shark and of other creatures as well, I wonder if we as a species hold that fear so strongly because we have failed to appreciate and recognize the primal aspects, the predatory aspects within ourselves, and embody them in perhaps a healthy or mature way. So we maybe project that onto other animals and come across in this fear-based kind of conquer mentality.
Yeah, I think so. So that's back to that inner work, the inner work of befriending the wilderness inside of us. Because once we do that first step, like I said, of connecting to the Umbelini and connecting to our humanity, the first step is actually making that intention with our consciousness that we want to connect with our humanity, that we want to connect with our life purpose, our joie de vivre. We want to feel, what is my calling? Why am I alive? Why do I eat every day? As the Zen masters would say, why do you eat every day? What is your purpose? And as we take that upon ourselves in a serious way, it sets up this very deep inquiry of connecting to your humanity. And along with that, also you get connected to this shadow energy inside of us. And in the shadow could be anxieties, low self-esteem, all those kind of shadow energies that we suppress. All those things come up to the surface, and that's partly why becoming a shaman or becoming a traditional sangoma is painful, because we go through the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul is this process of just facing the shadow energies inside of us. And often it would involve a lot of wilderness work as well, because as the old yogis talk about, the old mystics and the old shamans, we have to befriend the wilderness inside ourselves in order to truly befriend the wilderness outside ourselves. The two are one. There's this mirror relationship. So as the wilderness outside starts to suffer, we have to make that intention of going deeper within ourselves. And that's where the first activism starts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And you've mentioned your book, Leopard Warrior, which I am looking forward to reading. And I mentioned to you that I've listened to The Way of the Leopard, which contains a lot of teachings in this fantastic audio book that you've created. And of course, we're talking about the wilderness and how to assist and help the wilderness, which is in all centered around this next book that you're writing. So I guess the question here is, how is the book writing process going for you?
Well, it's a bit tricky at the moment because, as I shared with you, I've just had a little boy, and he's now 3 months old. So it's been a busy 6 yeah, very busy 6 months. But I've done my research, and I've got my material ready, and I'm hoping over the winter here in Canada to get a good proposal out for the book. So I'm excited about it. It'll be about the wilderness and about people reconnecting to the wilderness, reconnecting with animals. Mm-hmm. Because every animal is a reflection of us in some ways. And every animal has medicine to teach us. The birds are teaching us by their songs. The fish are teaching us. In particular, the salmon is teaching us how to find our way home despite the difficulties. And the salmon is a very old archetypal symbol of shamanism and of alchemy, because it goes through all the different phases of water in order to find its way home. And then it goes back again. It goes back to the same place that it was spawned, the same stream that it came from. It goes back there to spawn. And it goes on this incredible journey through the rapids where it has to go uphill. It has to go up against the current. And it's a good metaphor for human life. Sometimes we have to go against the current to feel our humanity. Sometimes we have to rise above our own challenges and our own shadow energies in order to feel the sublime. And this is what the salmon is teaching us. This very humble fish is teaching this to us. And it's interesting because now the salmon is really threatened again by man, because human beings have forgotten and lost their connection to soul, to divinity, to the sublime in nature. And the state of the wilderness is just calling for us to wake up inside.
Yes, and all of these teachings and all of these lessons and the connection that you're speaking about with nature, this is available for all of us if we go through this process, if we want to use that language of connecting to these aspects within self that you've been touching on, our humanity, soul, spirit, and really slowing down and retuning our ear to the heartbeat within, the heartbeat of our earth, and pointing our other ear upwards to the sky, and just really taking more pauses to reflect and to listen.
Yeah, and when I've been working with clients recently, I've just been doing a simple breathing exercise with clients, and we can even try that now when people are feeling overwhelmed and there's so much noise out there and there's so much noise inside our own minds. I was working with a client recently, and I was just encouraging her just to, in the craziness of her home environment as she was making supper, just to take a deep breath in and hold your breath for 4 seconds. And during that pause, feel your heartbeat. Because as you know, when you hold your breath, you can feel the pulse inside of you a little bit more clearly. And we can just do this for a moment now. We'll just take a deep breath in and pause for 4 seconds. So that you feel your heartbeat more clearly with that pause. So I find the heartbeats, our own heartbeats, just such a beautiful thing. So our connection to the wilderness is a call for us to, as I said, connect with our own inner wilderness, but to also fall in love with our own heartbeat, with the pulse inside of you, just to fall in love with that rhythm, because it's a beautiful rhythm. And when you start to fall in love with that beautiful heart pulse inside of you, then your life becomes much more magical. And if someone feels bored by listening or feeling their own heart pulse, then they are too busy. They need to pause more and need to listen more and let go. Because as children, we used to love listening to the pulse of our mother. And that was the way that we all calmed down in all cultures. And when you wrap a blanket around yourself and you feel your own pulse, it's the quickest way to calm down for all of us.
And what comes to mind for me is this classic saying, which is, if you can't sit down and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes, sit down and meditate for 1 hour. I don't know who said it. Someone classic like the Buddha or someone like that, I'm sure.
But if you're too busy to meditate for 20 minutes, then just meditate for an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're kind of touching on a similar theme here with this next question I would love to ask you. And you've spent so much time traveling and sharing and offering your gifts with the world. Being in so many different places, what can you share about connecting with the spirits of the land or spirits of place? What does this mean to you, and how do you language this to others?
I think it's all about listening to how the land speaks to you. So in each place I go, I'll have different experiences with the land. So it's just about listening to what the land is saying wherever you are. So right now, there's lots of snow outside. And I'm not really used to snow, so it's a whole adventure for me in exploring the nature of snow and ice. So how does the snow feel? How does the ice feel? When I'm walking, how does my body respond to the snow and the ice? How does it feel when I'm breathing it in? So at the moment, I'm going through a very deep meditation of snow and ice. And it's very interesting for me.
Yeah, and like we're touching on the same thread again, aren't we? Listening and feeling. And on a slight tangent, actually, I would love to ask you this, John. And I've heard you mention the electric nature of the body and the spine as a lightning rod, charged with electricity. And I was wondering if you could share a few words about what you understand about the electric nature of the body or the universe, and maybe just for a slight bit of context of what I'm thinking here. When many people talk about health and healing and disease or other related topics, there's often a large focus on, say, the biochemical nature of our body and various chemicals that could be unhealthy or detrimental for our health, or from a psycho-emotional perspective, that our thoughts and our beliefs can initiate a cascade of hormones or neurochemicals to induce physiological shifts at a cellular level, whether it's growth and health conducive or the opposite, breaking down the body. But, I feel like there's certainly not enough or nowhere near the amount of information or knowledge when it comes to the electric nature of the body. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, again, people just need to feel it, just explore it for themselves. Because if you're alive, then there's electricity going through you. And you feel that as a child, when you're in a place that's got a lot of static electricity, and then you give each other little shocks. You rub your feet in the ground and you give each other a static shock. And I think that's one of the first things I noticed here in Canada in the prairies. I'm just walking. I'm not even shuffling my feet in the ground. And I'd go to open the car door and I'd get this electric shock because of the static. Mm-hmm. And apparently it's just a lot of static in the prairies. I didn't know that. And it got a bit annoying sometimes, actually, because you go into the shop, you're just minding your own business, and the next thing you get this flippant shock as you're opening the car door, So it's just a reminder that we all have this beautiful electrical energy around us. And we all have choice about how to work with it or activate it and we can't get paranoid about our health either, because the first thing we have to realize is we're all going to die. These bodies are mortal. And as you do exercises to kind of feel your breath and feel your spirit, life and death become one thing. So the first thing we have to do is befriend the life force inside of us. Death is going to come, but we have to befriend the life force first. And that life force is this electrical current. And it's almost thinking about nature or thinking about our bodies as this wilderness again. And if you want to pay homage to the wilderness of your own body, imagine that you're going to the site of a magical stream or spring, a spring that's got magical qualities. And there's a lot of mythological stories and folklore around the world about this, where people are called to the site of a magical spring. And that magical spring is our own pulse, our own heartbeat, where the blood is pumping. Because there's only, the main organ of the body that is both mortal and immortal, you could say, or a doorway into the other world, and that's our own heart. The organ of our heart has both supernatural and physical qualities. It has a spiritual and a physical quality to it. And the first call for us is to really feel that. And as you do that, you feel how your electrical body does change. As you meditate and you feel your pulse, you see how there's an expansion of your heart pulse, how the energy gets stronger around you. And then certain things you do, like maybe breathing exercises or dancing, there's more heat around your hands. This is all part of being human. It's nothing fancy about it. It just means becoming aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you talk about this heat and some of the electric nature of the body in your book, which has many teachings, The Way of the Leopard. And I remember you saying...
The book was
Leopard.
But the audio...
Sure, the audio book.
Audio teachings. Yeah. Okay, audio teachings is The Way of the Leopard. Yes.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and I remember you saying something about that there is a portal inside the heart. So it touches on exactly what you're speaking on here.
Yes, the heart has this interesting quality to it, and where it has this spiritual portal. It's a gateway to the other world. And all the ancient mystical stories and folklores around the world and different cultures, a lot of them would speak about the doorway to the other world, this portal. And some ancient cultures would talk about the spring of life,
When we're talking about these threads, such as the portal in the heart and feeling and the electric nature of the body and all the rest of it, I am guessing that this ties into the divinatory practices that you practice and that you engage in. It's through cultivating these skills and ability to listen and feel and hear that you can tap into these divination practices.
That's right, yes. That's right, yeah. So,
I mean, yeah, if you got anything to expand on from that, there's a question here that I would love to ask.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, as I mentioned to you about the divination types of rituals and practices through our emails, from someone standing on the outside looking in, something such as, say, bone throwing, for example, or we could even look to other cultural traditions such as the runes or tarot or working with smoke or signs and symbols and omens out in nature. These things could be seen as, and you used the word before, supernatural or witchcraft, or maybe from one lens that's exactly what they are, but to me they seem like they are intuitive capabilities that we have within us and that we've collected this accumulation of muck and smog, the atmospheric fog of conditioning that has disconnected us from these skills. So I guess, is there a way to start to perhaps demystify, in one sense, some of these divinatory practices or techniques?
Yeah, I mean, what is divination? What is divination? Divination, to divine, means to read the soul. That's what it means, to divine. Read the soul. So then what is the soul? That soul is that part of us that doesn't die. What is that part of us that doesn't die? Tell me a dream that you've had that you remember that touches to the core of your being. That's it. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy, really. Human beings, we're all very similar, and we all dream, and we all eat, and we all, exercise, and we all struggle in various ways, and we all love our friends and family, and, there's such a similarity between all of us, all around the world, that these things are magical, yes, but our innate humanity, our innate intuition is magical. And all we have to do is listen to that, and then that opens us up to this doorway of wilderness and spiritual energy inside of us that really is like a spring of energy that keeps filling us. And it's something that we nourish with our spiritual practice. So that's where yoga comes in, and that's where Buddhism and all these various kinds of spiritual practices, where you are basically nourishing the divine inside of you. And as you do that, as you offer yourself up and you give yourself away, you receive the soul of the world. So spirituality, again, like we mentioned in the beginning, is about how can we help this world? How can we offer ourselves? I remember when I wrote about this in my book, in Leopard Warrior, I had this experience very, very young of going to South Korea and being mentored by a few Zen masters. And I remember on my first retreat there in South Korea, and the snow was falling, and it was quite difficult because it was 3 months in silent meditation for 3 months. And when the Zen masters were giving us a Dharma talk, they would say various things to us, but they would say, give yourself away when you're meditating. Make your body a prayer. Give yourself away to the world. And then sometimes when we were having interviews, in my case, they would amp up the interview, and my teacher would say, how can you help this world? Or how can you help South Africa? Because South Africa was going through a civil war at the time in terms of apartheid, and how can you help South Africa? I'm like, I don't know. He says, well, you must find the answer. And the way of finding the answer, again, is about when you're practicing giving yourself away. That's what they would say. Give yourself away. So when you're chanting, give yourself away. Sing like the birds in the trees. Give your voice as an offering to the world. And then when you do it from an open heart without any expectation of something coming back, then the soul of the world comes and speaks to you.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned prayer there. I would love to ask you, and you've already alluded to this much throughout our dialogue here, but I'll ask anyway. What is your prayer? What's your prayer for yourself and your family and the world?
What is my prayer?
What's your prayer?
What is my prayer? I suppose everything I'm saying to you is my prayer.
Yeah.
Everything I'm saying, everything I'm talking about is my prayer. So my breath, my singing, everything is my prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think what we can start doing is to perhaps come full circle and start to wrap things up. But on a side tangent as well, I would love to ask you about fatherhood, as this is something that we're both dipping our toes into. Not really dipping our toes, really diving in head first. So I guess I'm curious to know, how has your training, your apprenticeship and your practice as a sangoma, and of course you can't discount the rest of your life experience too, but how do you think this has all prepared you for fatherhood? What kind of insights do you have around this?
Well, I think fatherhood and motherhood is probably one of the greatest initiations that anyone can go through. And yeah, I mean, I was petrified beforehand. It was scary, and it's still scary because it's such a major initiation. And so I have a lot of respect for it. I have a lot of respect for initiation and what happens as we go through these doorways. And it's incredible. Yeah, it really is incredible. I think it's so beautiful just to watch my little guy when he smiles, and he smiles and he laughs. And when you come back and you haven't been away for the day, let's say, and then I come back and then he will just, we call it the morning coos or the evening coos, when he just starts gurgling and talking, and I must say it's very beautiful. And when he looks at you with these big blue eyes with such innocence, and it's very sublime. It's very beautiful. I'm sure you experience that as well when you look into your little one's eyes. And it's so pure and it's so beautiful. And then the only thing I can think of is I wish all babies could receive the kind of love that we are giving our little one. I wish all babies in the world could receive love and unconditional love. And then it makes me realize the state of the world is like it is because there must have been a lot of people who didn't receive the love that my little guy is receiving at the moment, So it makes you very tender. I think fatherhood or motherhood, when you're going through it in a very conscious way, it makes you feel very tender for the world and the suffering of other people. I think this is what's really made me even more sensitive to the suffering of other people and fathers and mothers who are struggling with children for maybe the children are sick, or maybe they don't have enough money, or a whole host of things. It makes you feel very tender to all of that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can resonate with that. I know that tenderness and that softness within myself too.
Yeah.
And, one of the great medicines for me from having the little one is also allowing myself to come back into my own child within, and the child that encapsulates the radiance and the lightheartedness and the silliness as well. That's a big piece of the puzzle that's dropped in for me, reconnecting back to being silly with my little one. And I've loved that part of the journey so much.
Yeah, and playing music with him. I mean, I'm singing to him and in rhythms, because you can't have a conversation yet, so everything has to be kind of rhythm and movement. And he doesn't like me to sit down, so I'll be sitting down and we've got a couple of rocking chairs at home because we're staying at my partner's parents' home, so we're with the grandparents. And he'll cry. He just doesn't like that, so we have to get him up again and move. It's always movement, so I'll be dancing with him and singing, and his movement, he loves that.
Yeah, I know that. I know that feeling. Yeah.
I haven't got a chance to relax and sit down. I didn't get that chance.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the other potent pieces for me here, just reflecting on this journey myself, has also been knowing that, when you speak about choice as well, it's like doing a lot of this internal work. It becomes apparent that the choice is there to not pass on a lot of the ancestral baggage or the patterns and programs that have been carried on. Like you're saying, looking out there in the world, there's a lot of little ones that aren't receiving the love. And of course, that is because those ancestral lines carry so much trauma. And yeah, I guess I'm just saying that I know that it's up to me to draw a line and say, okay, yeah, this is where it ends right here. And I have the choice to be able to cultivate more conscious awareness to being in my heart more of the time and trying to pass on as much of that heart consciousness or that heart orientation or medicine when I'm in my interactions, and not just with the little one, but of course that just expands out to the rest of family and the rest of community and to the greater web of life.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first choice is to close our eyes and just feel our pulse and breathe. Just to breathe. That's the first choice. And we can just be on autopilot, like a lot of us, and then when you're stressed, you have to be remembered to breathe and slow down. And I think this is probably the lesson of the coronavirus around the world, is to really show us how we've been too busy, and that we need to speak to each other more and listen more and slow down more. I mean, this is the gift of corona. I think it's brought a lot of gifts.
Yes, agreed. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap things up, John. What do you think?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, great. So maybe to end, where can people find you? And I'll also ask you about any other perhaps projects or the online offerings or courses, or if people are feeling called to reach out and do some work with you in some way.
Yeah, you can just go onto my website, and I do mentoring, one-to-one mentoring, and I also do private sessions, and I also do a monthly ceremony every month, which is like a monthly webinar, which people subscribe to. So every month is a different theme, and I talk about dreams and the dream time, and then I'll be doing chanting and leading people in a practice. And it's a nice kind of global circle that I've started now, and I've been doing for just over a year now. And it's doing really well. So it's a nice way for people to connect with this work and to learn, and also to connect with other people around the world. My monthly webinars, yeah. So it's all on my website, these monthly webinars, or like I said, these ceremonies. Then people can also sign up for my newsletter. They can do that on my website, and they can also read my book, Leopard Warrior, and listen to the audio teachings, which are different from the book, and that's The Way of the Leopard. So they're two different products, you can say, both published by my publisher, Sounds True, in Boulder, Colorado.
Great. And your website, for those that are listening or viewing and want to jump straight there, is simply johnlockley.com.
That's right, yeah. John Lockley. Yeah.
Great.
That's it.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me on BirdSong, John. It's been a pleasure to connect, and I appreciate you and the work that you're doing and all that you're sharing with the world and the time that you have gifted here today.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to all our listeners and viewers, any resources and links that we've mentioned here, including the links to John's book and the audio book, can be found over at the show notes to this episode, which is medicinepath.net/birdsong. So head over there if you're keen to follow up on any of the threads we've mentioned, and make sure to send John some love and tune into his previous podcasts and his books. So let's leave it at that. Many thanks once again, John.
Thanks, Kyle.
Hey everyone, as we close up another episode, I want to extend my thanks for tuning into BirdSong. And I would also love to extend a warm invitation to say that if you value what BirdSong is all about, if you find these episodes insightful or inspiring, then please consider offering a little support in helping with the expansion and deepening of this show. There's a few ways which you can do that. You can subscribe on all the usual media channels, which includes Spotify, YouTube, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And it is also very warmly welcomed if you share this episode with community, whether through social media or face-to-face. If you are willing to go the extra mile, please leave a rating and a review on iTunes, as it helps others recognize the value in this show. And I know just how many times I have overlooked or ignored this invitation through listening to other podcasts, but having now stepped into the role of host and creator of a show, I now recognize how much it really helps with the expansion of things. So to make it easy, I've added a direct link in the description of this episode for you to leave a rating and a review relatively easily. Lastly, please check out our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/ckmedicinepath, all one word. And for the smallest of contributions, such as $2 per month, which all adds up to make such a big difference, it really helps with the behind the scenes unfolding of the show, such as website hosting, maintenance, pre-conversation research, the editing process, getting in-depth show notes written up, and all the rest of it. So I would be stoked to have your support in that way to help assist the vision here with BirdSong. Big thank you to everyone who has offered their support through Patreon, or through sharing the show with others, or through leaving a rating and a review. Again, all the links can be found in the description to this episode, or you can jump straight over to medicinepath.net/birdsong for more information. Once again, thanks for being here. I will leave it at that, and I'm trusting that this listening was and will continue to be as fruitful as birdsong on morning wind. I'm your host, Caiyuda Kiora. Blessings on the path forward, and until next time, all our relations.